Mist clings to the ancient pines of Romania's Carpathian Mountains. The silence here feels deliberate, watching, waiting. Mircea Lupescu, a weathered shepherd with eyes that have witnessed half a century of mountain secrets, follows his flock through a secluded glen on a crisp autumn morning. His dog stops suddenly, hackles raised, refusing to move forward. Ahead, bathed in dappled sunlight, lies an arrangement too perfect to be natural. Backpacks form a meticulous circle. Sleeping bags unfurled as if awaiting bodies that vanished mid-dream. Water bottles stand upright, still containing liquid. A broken camera positioned with deliberate care against a moss-covered stone. 6 people entered these mountains 13 weeks earlier. Not one emerged. Yet here were their belongings, arranged with impossible precision, untouched by scavengers or weather, bearing silent witness to a mystery that defies explanation. This isn't fiction. This happened in 2019 in the remote wilderness near Valea Lupului, Romania. 5 scouts and their leader vanished without a trace during what should have been a routine expedition. The only evidence they existed at all was found 13 weeks later, their gear arranged in a pattern that still haunts investigators today. Before we unravel this chilling mystery from Romania's ancient mountains, comment where you're watching from and if you've ever felt that sensation of being watched in the wilderness. Subscribe now to join our community at Last Seen Stories, where we explore the unexplained disappearances that remind us how thin the veil between known and unknown truly is. Valea Lupului, Wolf Valley in Romanian, nestles in the shadow of peaks that have witnessed centuries of unexplained vanishings. Local tradition forbids speaking of these disappearances after sunset, a superstition that persists despite modern skepticism. Generations of villagers have passed down stories of hikers who stepped behind trees and never emerged, of hunters following wounded prey into thickets only to vanish themselves, leaving nothing but abandoned rifles and unanswered questions. It was into this storied wilderness that Elliot Eli Grayson led his expedition in May 2019. At 42, Eli was no amateur adventurer. His 20 years as a park ranger in the American Northwest had honed his wilderness skills before he transitioned to teaching environmental science at an international school in Bucharest. Students described him as methodical, prepared for any contingency, with a calm demeanor that inspired absolute trust. Eli could read the mountains like others read books, recalled Anton Vasilescu, a local guide who helped plan the route. He respected these forests in a way few outsiders do. That's why nobody questioned his judgment when he chose these 5 scouts for the expedition. The 5 teenagers who joined Eli represented diverse backgrounds but shared a thirst for adventure that drew them to the Carpathian Challenge. Maya Patel, 16, wore her camera like others might wear jewelry, an extension of herself. The daughter of Indian immigrants, she'd joined the Scouts to overcome her fear of the outdoors, only to discover a talent for capturing nature's hidden moments. Her Instagram account showcased her evolving eye, delicate mushrooms emerging from decaying logs, light filtering through canopies, animal tracks telling silent stories. She noticed things others didn't, her father said later. She'd point to a slight depression in mud or a bent twig and construct entire narratives about what had happened there. She was usually right. Liam O'Connor, 17, embodied natural leadership. Captain of his school's rock climbing team, his athletic build and quick smile masked a competitive streak that occasionally pushed boundaries. His backpack always contained an emergency kit, more comprehensive than required. A habit formed after a childhood accident left him stranded briefly on a family camping trip. Liam thrived on challenge, his climbing coach remembered. Sometimes I worried he'd take unnecessary risks to prove himself, but he always seemed to know exactly where the line was. Sophie Martinez brought an intellectual curiosity that balanced Liam's physical prowess. At 15, her fascination with Romanian folklore had already led her to learn the language and correspond with local historians. Her journal, recovered from her home, contained meticulous notes about the Carpathian legends, particularly those involving mysterious disappearances. "She told me the mountains had secrets," her mother recalled. "She wanted to understand why certain places accumulated stories of people vanishing. It was academic interest, never fear. Sophie didn't scare easily." Noah Kim, the youngest at 14, initially joined only because his parents insisted he disconnect from technology. His reluctance dissolved after discovering how his problem-solving mind adapted to wilderness challenges. He'd created an innovative water filtration system using materials from their first aid kit during a previous expedition, earning Eli's respect. "He complained constantly about missing his games," laughed his father during early interviews. Then he'd spend hours explaining how he'd rigged a solar charger or improved their shelter design. The outdoors changed him. Completing the group was Ava Johnson, 16, whose quiet resilience stemmed from overcoming personal hardships. Raised in foster care before being adopted at 12, she found peace in natural settings that contrasted with her turbulent early years. Her adoptive parents noted how the forest seemed to center her in ways therapy never quite managed. Ava didn't talk much about her feelings, her adoptive mother explained, but she'd come back from hikes with this calm that lasted for days. Nature was her healing place. The expedition preparations were meticulous. Eli filed detailed routes with local authorities, scheduled regular radio check-ins, and conducted 3 preparatory weekend trips to test equipment and build team cohesion. Parents signed permissions with the usual mixture of pride and concern, reassured by Eli's experience and the scouts' obvious excitement. None could have known they were witnessing their final goodbyes at the trailhead in Valea Lupului, where locals crossed themselves discreetly as the 6 adventurers shouldered their packs and disappeared into the ancient forest. Dawn broke cold and clear on May 15th as the expedition set out from Valea Lupului. Mist rose from the valley floor, transforming the landscape into something from a fairy tale. Villagers watched from doorways as the 6 figures crossed the wooden bridge marking the boundary between civilization and wilderness, their breath forming small clouds in the morning chill. "The mountains are restless today," muttered Valentin Codreanu, the village elder, to no one in particular. "They hunger." The first 2 days passed exactly as planned. Eli led the group along established trails that wound through pine forests and alpine meadows, vibrant with spring wildflowers. The scouts' initial chatter gradually gave way to awed silence as the Carpathian wilderness revealed itself in layers of increasing beauty and isolation. Their first campsite nestled against a rocky outcrop overlooking a valley where wolves had been spotted the previous season. As shadows lengthened across their clearing, the group gathered around a small fire. Eli demonstrated proper techniques for building flames that minimized smoke while maximizing heat, his weathered hands moving with practiced precision. "Fire is life out here," he explained, feeding small twigs into the growing flames. "Respect it and it protects you. Disrespect it and it destroys everything." The scouts took turns sharing their impressions of the day. Maya described the light patterns she'd photographed breaking through the forest canopy. Noah admitted his surprise at spotting a red deer before anyone else. Liam recounted scaling a small cliff face just to see what was up there. Ava spoke quietly about the medicinal plants she'd identified, knowledge gleaned from a book she carried everywhere. Then Sophie opened her journal and began reading local legends about the mountains. Her voice dropped to a near whisper as she shared the story of 7 woodcutters who disappeared in 1892, leaving only their axes arranged in a perfect circle around an ancient oak. "They say the forest took them," she concluded. Because they cut trees from a sacred grove. Locals found their tools, but never their bodies. Liam scoffed. People got lost in the woods all the time before GPS. There's always a rational explanation. Is there? Sophie challenged. What about the hiking group in 1973? 6 experienced mountaineers vanished near here. Search parties found their campsite undisturbed, food still cooking on the stove. Urban legends, Noah declared dismissively, like Bigfoot or something. But we're not in an urban area, Sophie countered, with a half-smile that didn't reach her eyes. On the 3rd day, subtle shifts occurred. Maya noticed the birds had stopped singing in a densely wooded area they passed through, creating an unnatural silence that made her skin prickle. Her photographs from this period show normal forest scenes, but with a curious absence of wildlife, details she pointed out to Eli, who made note but didn't seem concerned. That afternoon, Noah's GPS device began showing impossible coordinates, placing them simultaneously at their actual location and 30 kilometers north. His phone compass spun erratically before draining its fully charged battery in minutes. Electromagnetic anomalies, Eli suggested, switching to his traditional compass. It happens in certain mountain regions. We'll navigate the old-fashioned way. But when Noah switched to his backup power bank that evening, he found it drained too, though it had never been used. He said nothing to the others, not wanting to appear foolish for bringing faulty equipment. That night, Liam took the first watch while others slept. His journal entry, recovered later from his home, described a growing certainty that their group was being observed. Something's off. Can't explain it exactly. Like when you feel someone staring at you in a crowded room. Except we're the only people for miles. Kept looking over my shoulder all day. Told myself it was just Sophie's stories getting to me. But now, sitting alone while everyone sleeps, I swear I saw eyes reflecting our firelight from between the trees. Too high up to be a wolf. When I shined my flashlight, nothing was there. I'm writing this down to see if it sounds as crazy on paper as it does in my head. It doesn't feel like an animal watching us. It feels deliberate. By the 4th day, clouds began gathering over the jagged peaks. The barometer Eli carried showed a rapid pressure drop, indicating an approaching storm. They quickened their pace, hoping to reach a designated emergency shelter marked on their maps. The air grew thick with humidity as thunder rumbled in the distance. "We need to find cover," Eli announced, studying the darkening sky. This weather wasn't in the forecast, but mountain storms can form quickly. The scouts exchanged glances. They had all checked the extended forecast before departure. Clear skies were predicted for the entire week. As fat raindrops began to fall, transforming quickly into a deluge, the group discovered their waterproof gear wasn't performing as expected. Jackets that had repelled water during gear testing now seemed to absorb moisture. Maya's camera case leaked despite its waterproof rating. Liam's boots began to squelch with each step, though they were relatively new. "This way," Eli called over the rising wind, leading them toward a narrow ravine that offered some protection from the horizontal rain. "We'll wait it out here." As night fell and the storm intensified, they huddled together in the improvised shelter, listening to the tempest tear through the ancient forest. None of them could have known that by morning, their ordinary expedition would transform into one of the most baffling disappearances in modern history. The storm that night was unlike anything the locals had witnessed in decades. Wind screamed through the valleys with an almost human voice. Lightning struck with such frequency that the mountains seemed caught in perpetual daylight. Torrential rain transformed gentle streams into raging torrents within hours. In their makeshift shelter within the ravine, the scouts listened to nature's fury with growing unease. Sophie was the first to mention the whispers. "Can you hear that?" she asked during a brief lull in the storm. "Voices in the wind." The others strained to listen, exchanging concerned glances. "It's just the wind through the rocks," Eli assured her. though his expression betrayed uncertainty. "No," Sophie insisted, her eyes wide. "They're saying names, our names." Maya moved closer to Sophie, placing a comforting arm around her shoulders. "It's okay. Storms can play tricks on your mind." But later, during his watch, Noah heard it too, indistinct murmurs beneath the howling wind that seemed to call from deep within the forest. He woke Liam, who reluctantly admitted he'd been hearing similar sounds throughout the evening. Their equipment continued to malfunction in inexplicable ways. Flashlight batteries died simultaneously. Eli's weather radio picked up only static, interspersed with what sounded like distant laughter. Even their analog watches stopped at precisely 3:27 a.m., a detail that would later fascinate and perplex investigators. By dawn, the storm had passed, leaving behind a transformed landscape. The ravine where they had sheltered was now dangerously close to flooding. As pale morning light filtered through the mist, Eli conducted an equipment check, documenting the strange failures in his waterproof notebook. It was during this assessment that Maya discovered her camera's damage, the lens cracked despite being securely packed. The memory card was corrupted as well, all her photographs gone except for one final image, a blurry shot of dense forest with what appeared to be a tall, thin shadow standing between distant trees. "We need to adjust our route," Eli announced, studying his map. "The storm likely washed out several trails. We'll head northeast toward higher ground, then loop back to civilization if conditions worsen." The group packed quickly, an unusual quiet settling over them. Ava, normally reserved but steady, refused to venture away from the group even briefly. Liam's confident demeanor had given way to hypervigilance, his eyes constantly scanning the tree line. Noah triple-checked their remaining functional electronics, muttering about electromagnetic fields and solar flare activity. As they departed the ravine, Sophie paused, staring into the forest with an unnerving intensity. "They're waiting for us," she whispered, too quietly for the others to hear. That evening, they established camp in a small clearing beside a stream swollen with rainwater. The scouts huddled closer together than usual around the fire, conversation minimal. Eli maintained an outward calm, but his journal entry that night, recovered months later from his home, revealed growing concern. Something's wrong, not just the equipment failures or the weather. The team's dynamic has shifted. They're scared, though none will admit it outright. "I considered aborting the expedition today, but our communications are down, and the quickest route to safety is forward, not back. If conditions don't improve by morning, we'll change course for the ranger station at Piatra Craiu Lui." Strange dreams last night? Can't shake the feeling we're being herded rather than hiking of our own volition. The group established a watch rotation, Eli taking first shift, followed by Liam, then Maya, Noah, Sophie, and finally Ava. Before dawn, they retreated to their tents earlier than usual, exhaustion from the previous night's storm dragging at their limbs. At 5:43 a.m., according to his statement, Eli awoke to absolute silence. The constant background noise of the forest, insects, wind in leaves, the nearby stream, had ceased entirely. Even more disturbing was the absence of any sound from the scouts' tents. He emerged from his shelter to find the campsite empty. All 5 teens had vanished without disturbing the camp's perimeter. Their sleeping bags remained as if recently occupied, still warm in some cases. Personal items lay where they had been placed the night before. Even the scouts' boots remained neatly lined outside their tents. "Hello?" Eli called, his voice unnaturally loud in the silent forest. "Maya? Liam? Where are you?" His calls went unanswered. A quick check confirmed the stream still flowed nearby, though silently, as if afraid to draw attention to itself. The forest had not returned to life with dawn as expected. Instead, an oppressive stillness hung over the clearing. Eli conducted a methodical search of the immediate area, finding no footprints leading away from camp despite the soft ground. The perimeter he had established with warning tripwires remained undisturbed. The only anomaly was a perfect circle of dew-free grass in the center of the clearing, as if something had rested there during the night, preventing moisture from forming. Desperate and increasingly frantic, Eli expanded his search, maintaining voice contact with the campsite by shouting at regular intervals. After 4 hours of finding nothing, no tracks, no clothing fibers, no sign of struggle or flight, he returned to attempt radio contact with emergency services. To his shock, the previously dead radio sprung to life, connecting him immediately to a ranger station 80 kilometers away. His voice hoarse from calling for the scouts, Eli reported the inexplicable disappearance. Romanian authorities responded with unprecedented speed. Within hours, the first search and rescue teams arrived by helicopter, rappelling into the clearing where a visibly shaken Eli had maintained a vigil by the empty tents. "They were here," he repeated to each new official. "I didn't leave the campsite unattended. There was no sound, no struggle. They just vanished while I slept." Initial investigation revealed several troubling inconsistencies. Despite Eli's insistence that the scouts had gone to bed in their sleeping bags, forensic analysis showed no DNA evidence in 2 of them. The lack of footprints extending from the camp contradicted any theory of voluntary departure. Most perplexing was the absence of any signs of wildlife in the vicinity, no tracks, droppings, or evidence of foraging, as if animals had been avoiding the area. The only footprints found belonged to Eli himself, tracking his movements during his search. When shown this evidence, Eli became agitated, insisting the forest floor had been wiped clean of the previous day's tracks that should have surrounded the campsite. As the day progressed, authorities grew increasingly suspicious of Eli's account. The impossibility of 5 people vanishing without trace led some investigators to consider him a suspect. He submitted voluntarily to questioning, his desperation to find the scouts evident in every response. "I was responsible for them," he repeated, voice breaking. "I promised their parents they'd be safe." The investigation is just beginning. Hit that like button if you're feeling the tension build and want more true wilderness mysteries on your feed. Because what happened next would transform a missing persons case into something far more unsettling. Within 48 hours of Eli's emergency call, the Carpathian wilderness witnessed one of the largest search operations in Romanian history. The disappearance of 5 international students triggered an immediate multinational response. American, Indian, and British diplomatic channels opened to provide resources and expertise, while the Romanian military deployed specialist mountain units. What began as a standard missing person search soon evolved into something unprecedented. Colonel Mircea Antonescu of the Romanian Gendarmeria's Mountain Rescue Division took command, establishing a forward base in Valea Lupului and dividing the search area into quadrants. "We approached this methodically at first," Antonescu later explained. 5 teenagers, 1 adult leader, presumably lost in difficult terrain after a severe storm. We've conducted hundreds of similar operations, but within days it became clear this was different. The operation's scale was impressive. Over 200 professional searchers supplemented by 150 local volunteers combed through dense forest and rugged mountainsides. Thermal imaging drones mapped inaccessible areas. Helicopters with infrared cameras conducted daily sweeps. 20 specialized search dogs were brought in from throughout Europe, yet the challenges they faced defied conventional explanation. "The dogs wouldn't work," recalled Stefan Ciobanu, a veteran canine handler. "These were highly trained search animals with hundreds of successful recoveries. But they would reach the campsite and simply lie down, refusing to track. Some whimpered, one actually howled, a sound I'd never heard him make before, then bit through his leash, trying to retreat. Electronic equipment suffered mysterious failures, similar to what the expedition had experienced. Radio transmissions became garbled with static, or, more disturbingly, with what several operators independently described as children's voices counting backward. GPS systems showed searchers in impossible locations or moving at impossible speeds. Drone batteries depleted after minutes rather than hours. We had to revert to analog methods, Antonescu said. Paper maps, compasses, verbal reports. Even then, teams reported compass needles spinning or pointing in conflicting directions within the same group. The search conditions themselves seemed to actively resist human intrusion. Trails visible on satellite imagery taken days earlier had vanished. Rock formations documented in previous surveys had somehow shifted position. A natural cave system that local guides had used as shelter for decades could no longer be located. As days stretched into weeks, the psychological toll mounted. Search teams reported vivid nightmares involving the missing scouts. Some described hearing voices calling their names from empty sections of forest. 3 experienced mountaineers requested transfers after simultaneously experiencing the same hallucination, a tall, emaciated figure watching them from between trees. In Valealupului, the families maintained a painful vigil. They established a makeshift command center in the village's small schoolhouse, walls lined with maps and photos of the missing. Parents took turns monitoring radio communications, their faces increasingly drawn as hope dimmed. The worst part was the not knowing, Maya's father later told reporters. If they had found bodies, at least we could begin to grieve. This limbo, not knowing if our children were suffering, if they were alive or dead, it was unbearable. Eli's mental state deteriorated rapidly. Initially a crucial resource because of his familiarity with the expedition and terrain, he became increasingly incoherent during debriefings. He insisted on joining search teams daily despite physical exhaustion, pushing himself to the brink of collapse. He wouldn't sleep, remembered Dr. Elena Kozma, the operation's psychological support officer. When he did, he would wake screaming about them coming through the trees. His guilt was consuming him, but there was something else, genuine terror of something he couldn't or wouldn't articulate. By the 3rd week, local superstitions had thoroughly permeated the search effort. Village elders spoke of the hunger of the forest and the thin places where boundaries between worlds dissolved. Searchers began carrying traditional protective charms. Small bags of salt and iron filings hung around necks, certain herbs tucked into pockets. The scientific team brought in to analyze environmental factors found no evidence of toxic gases, hallucinogenic fungi, or other natural phenomena that might explain the mass disappearance. Water samples from the stream near the campsite showed no contamination. Soil analysis revealed nothing abnormal except an unexplained cold spot at the camp center that remained several degrees cooler than surrounding ground regardless of sunlight exposure. After 6 weeks of finding absolutely nothing, no clothing fragments, no personal items, no indisputable evidence the scouts had ever been in those mountains beyond their abandoned campsite, Romanian authorities began scaling back the operation. International teams were recalled. The daily helicopter flights reduced to weekly ones. The forward command base dismantled. Colonel Antonescu made the difficult call to transition from rescue to recovery, the bureaucratic term signaling the shift from searching for survivors to searching for remains. Yet even this phase yielded nothing, as if the mountains had swallowed 5 people whole, leaving no trace for the living to find. By week 8, only a skeleton crew remained, going through the motions of a search that most now considered futile. The families returned to their respective countries, carrying the unique pain of ambiguous loss, grief without closure, questions without answers, and then 5 more weeks of silence. On September 11th, 13 weeks after the disappearance, Mircea Lupescu left his small farmhouse before dawn, as he had done every day for 40 years. The 67-year-old shepherd followed his usual route through the foothills with his flock and 2 border collies, expecting nothing but another quiet day on the mountainside. By mid-morning, he had reached a secluded glen approximately 12 kilometers from the original campsite where the scouts had vanished. The location was strange, not on any marked trail, separated from normal routes by a ridge considered too dangerous for casual hikers. His dog's behavior changed suddenly. The normally obedient animals refused to advance, hackles raised, emitting low growls at something ahead. Lupescu, assuming a predator threatened his sheep, cautiously proceeded alone around a stand of ancient pines. What he discovered stops most listeners cold. In a perfectly circular clearing that Lupescu swore had never existed before, the complete gear of the missing expedition lay arranged in a deliberate, ritual-like pattern. 6 backpacks formed an evenly spaced outer circle, each positioned with their openings facing outward. Inside this circle, 6 sleeping bags were unfurled in a star pattern, radiating from a central point. At this center point rested Eli's compass, the needle spinning continuously despite the absence of magnetic interference. Beside it lay his journal, open to a blank page with a pen placed precisely across it. Water bottles stood upright between each sleeping bag, all partially filled with clear liquid, later confirmed to be pure mountain water. Small personal items, Maya's hair ties, Liam's pocket knife, Sophie's folklore book, Noah's backup battery, Ava's plant identification guide, were positioned with such precision that investigators initially suspected a hoax. Maya's damaged camera rested against a stone at the circle's edge, its broken lens aimed toward the center like a silent observer. Most disturbing were the scouts' hiking boots, each pair placed neatly at the foot of their respective sleeping bags, laces untied as if their owners had just stepped out of them. It was like they had prepared for sleep and then ascended, Lupescu later told authorities, crossing himself. No human hands arranged this. The forest returned what it wanted to return. Forensic teams descended on the site within hours of Lupescu's report. Their findings defied logical explanation. The sleeping bags showed minimal exposure to elements despite 13 weeks in the open mountain air. No insect damage, minimal debris, no sign of animal interference. Soil and vegetation patterns suggested the clearing had formed recently. Trees that should have taken decades to grow appeared to have bent away from the circle rather than being cut, creating the perfect circular space. The water in the bottles contained traces of minerals, matching the stream near the original campsite, 12 kilometers away, rather than any water source near the discovery site. Most inexplicable was the complete absence of human remains, hair, blood, or DNA evidence, apart from expected traces on personal belongings. It was as if the gear had been carefully cleaned, then arranged by unseen hands. Eli's compass, a high-quality mountaineering model with renowned reliability, continued its impossible spinning until the moment it was sealed in an evidence container. When reopened at the forensics lab, the needle had stopped at a precise northeast heading, pointing exactly toward the original disappearance site. Head forensic analyst Dr. Christian Dalka struggled to maintain scientific objectivity in his preliminary report. In 22 years of forensic investigation, I have never encountered a scene that so thoroughly resists rational explanation. The precision of the arrangement, the selective weathering of materials, and the absence of any biological decomposition evidence suggest either an elaborate stage scene requiring significant resources and expertise for which no motive can be established, or something beyond our current scientific framework. The arrangement bore eerie similarities to previous disappearances in the Carpathians, particularly the 1973 case Sophie had mentioned around the campfire. In that instance, 6 mountaineers' equipment was found arranged in a geometric pattern, though never the mountaineers themselves. Media reports sparked international attention. The circular formation of gear without bodies fueled theories ranging from elaborate pranks to alien abduction. Paranormal investigators descended on Valea Lupului, much to the distress of locals who refused to guide them to either the discovery site or original campsite. Inside Maya's recovered camera, technicians found the memory card largely corrupted, except for 3 images. The blurry forest shot with the strange shadow taken the day before the disappearance, a night shot of the campsite showing 5 tents with an unusual light source illuminating them from above, and a final image time-stamped 3:27 a.m., the exact time all watches stopped, showing nothing but impenetrable darkness with a suggestion of vertical shapes that digital enhancement could never quite resolve. The gear's condition raised more questions than it answered. Despite being outdoors for 3 months, the items showed selective exposure patterns. Sleeping bags remained almost pristine, while portions of the backpacks showed years' worth of weathering in specific patterns, almost like symbols or crude writing. Eli's journal contained all his expected entries up to the night before the disappearance, followed by 40 blank pages, and then a single line in handwriting experts could not conclusively match to Eli's. The forest remembers what we choose to forget. As the investigation continued, one detail disturbed officials more than any other: footprints, or more precisely, the absence of footprints leading to or from the site, despite the soft ground that should have recorded any human passage. The gear had somehow been placed there without leaving traces, as if it had materialized from thin air. It was as though the earth itself had given up these items, observed Colonel Antonescu during the secondary investigation. Items that, by all natural laws, should have been scattered by animals, degraded by weather, or simply random in their distribution. Instead, we found what can only be described as a memorial, created by something that wanted to be noticed, but not understood. The discovery of the gear triggered an international investigative response that continues in various forms to this day. Theories emerged from official channels, grieving families, paranormal researchers, and locals with generational knowledge of the mountains. What follows are the predominant explanations, each with their supporting evidence and critical weaknesses. Official investigators initially pursued 3 main theories. The first centered on environmental factors, specifically neurotoxic compounds that might cause disorientation, hallucinations, and erratic behavior. Similar to the Death Valley Walking Rocks theory, investigators considered underground pockets of natural gas temporarily releasing during the storm. This could explain the scouts leaving camp in a confused state, perhaps removing their boots if experiencing tactile hallucinations. Certain fungal spores or volcanic gas emissions can cause shared psychosis, explained Dr. Mariana Ionescu, a neurobiologist consulted on the case. The victims might wander away, disrobe despite cold temperatures, and become separated. The gear arrangement could be explained by Eli returning in a confused state, attempting to create some form of signal. This theory falters on multiple points. No environmental toxins were detected in exhaustive testing. The lack of footprints remains unexplained, and the precision of the gear arrangement contradicts the behavior of someone in a confused state. The second official theory involved criminal activity, specifically abduction by human traffickers operating in the remote region. Romania has documented issues with trafficking rings, and international students could be valuable targets. The arrangement could be a warning to others searching these mountains, suggested Interpol consultant Jürgen Kleinman. Criminal organizations establish territorial markers in remote areas where they operate. The precision was meant to send a message. This theory struggled to explain how traffickers could remove 6 people without leaving evidence, why they would take people but leave valuable gear, and how they navigated terrain that even trained search teams found challenging. No trafficking network claimed responsibility or showed evidence of having the missing scouts. The third official hypothesis proposed a voluntary disappearance, suggesting the group staged their own vanishing. Cases exist of people elaborately faking deaths or disappearances for insurance fraud, publicity, or to escape problems. This theory collapsed under scrutiny. All 6 had strong family connections and no significant personal problems. None had access to the financial resources required to establish new identities. Most definitively, the arrangement of gear 13 weeks later could not be explained by an initial voluntary departure. Beyond official channels, locals in Valea Lupului offered explanations drawn from centuries of mountain lore. The forest that hungers represents the most prevalent local theory, the belief that certain ancient woodlands periodically require human life to maintain their vitality. These hungry forests supposedly create circumstances that lead to disappearances, sometimes returning possessions as a form of exchange completion. My grandfather witnessed it in 1953, claimed village elder Nikolai Dalka. 3 loggers taken, their equipment returned in a circle 1 month later. It happens when humans take too much without giving proper respect. The concept of thin places, locations where boundaries between physical and spiritual realms weaken, features prominently in Carpathian folklore. Locals believe certain geographic formations, particularly those with unusual electromagnetic properties, can act as doorways through which humans might pass, voluntarily or otherwise. The scouts found a threshold and crossed over, suggested Lidia Antonescu, a traditional healer from the region. They walk in another world now, parallel to ours, but not of it. The arranged gear marks the spot where worlds touch. Most controversial are theories involving time anomalies. Several residents of Valea Lupului claim previous disappearances coincided with unusual temporal phenomena, watches running backward, villagers experiencing missing time, or encountering seemingly disoriented travelers wearing outdated clothing. The mountains fold time like fabric, one anonymous source told investigators. Those children may yet return, but when they do, mere minutes will have passed for them, while years have gone for us. The case bears striking similarities to other wilderness disappearances globally, particularly the infamous Dyatlov Pass incident of 1959, where 9 experienced Russian hikers died under mysterious circumstances. Their tent was cut open from inside, they fled into lethal weather without proper clothing, and their bodies showed unusual injuries inconsistent with typical wilderness fatalities. More recent cases documented by author David Polides in his Missing 411 series share disturbing patterns with the Carpathian incident, victims vanishing from groups without witness, belongings found arranged in unnatural ways, search dogs refusing to track, and electronic equipment failing. Search and rescue professionals remain divided on the case. Some insist conventional explanations must apply, regardless of the apparent contradictions in evidence. People don't simply vanish without trace, maintained Andrei Codrescu, a veteran mountain rescue specialist. They die from exposure, become injured and immobile, or make navigation errors that take them far from search areas. The arrangement of gear suggests human intervention, not supernatural forces. Others who participated in the search acknowledge the case's uniqueness. "I've recovered over 50 people from these mountains in 20 years, said Bogdan Dalka, who led one of the primary search teams. Something different happened here. The forest felt wrong. The silence was wrong. My compass showed north in 5 different directions in the same spot. I don't have an explanation, but I know what I experienced. What really happened to these 6 people? Share your theory in the comments. Was it something natural, criminal, or beyond our understanding? As we'll see next, the impact of this mystery extends far beyond the initial investigation. The absence of resolution has transformed the Carpathian disappearance from a tragic incident into an enduring wound for all connected to it. For the families, grief without closure creates a perpetual limbo, unable to fully mourn, yet forced to continue living. "There's no grave to visit," explained Liam's mother during a rare interview. "No body to bury, no definitive moment to say goodbye. We exist in this terrible space between hope and acceptance." The families have responded differently to their shared tragedy. Maya's parents established a scholarship for young wildlife photographers, ensuring her passion survives even as uncertainty surrounds her fate. Noah's family created a foundation developing improved emergency communication technology for wilderness expeditions. Liam's parents relocated to Romania for 6 months, conducting their own investigation before emotional exhaustion forced their return home. Sophie's mother, perhaps most poignantly, continues to maintain her daughter's room exactly as she left it, with half-finished homework still on the desk and unwashed laundry in the hamper. "Until I know for certain," she insists, "I must be ready for her return." Ava's adoptive parents have channeled their grief into advocacy for improved international response protocols for missing persons cases. Their work has led to policy changes in how multinational search operations are coordinated. In Valea Lupului, the disappearance has reshaped community identity. Tourism initially surged as curiosity seekers and paranormal enthusiasts descended on the village, prompting locals to organize against what they viewed as exploitation of tragedy. Now, a small memorial stands at the village edge where the trail begins. 6 stone markers bearing not names but symbols, chosen by the families. A camera lens, a climbing rope, an open book, a computer chip, a sprouting seed, and a compass. "We don't speak their names after sunset," explained the current village head. "Not from superstition alone, but from respect. This place holds their story now." Romanian authorities implemented sweeping changes to wilderness safety regulations. All expeditions into the Carpathians now require emergency beacons, daily check-ins, and minimum group sizes of 4 adult leaders for youth excursions. A permanent monitoring station operates near the original disappearance site, though staff rotate frequently due to reports of psychological distress during extended assignments. The scientific community remains divided on the case's implications. Some researchers have established long-term monitoring of the area, measuring everything from electromagnetic fluctuations to mycological growth patterns. Others dismiss the case as having conventional explanations, obscured by poor evidence preservation and sensationalized reporting. Dr. Elena Novak, a geophysicist who has studied the region for 3 years, offers a measured perspective. "We've documented magnetic anomalies that could explain equipment failures, but nothing that accounts for the disappearance itself or the condition and arrangement of the recovered items. Science requires us to acknowledge when our current frameworks are insufficient." The recovered photographs from Maya's camera have become subjects of intense analysis. The final image, showing only darkness with vertical shapes, has been enhanced using increasingly sophisticated technology. Recent analysis revealed what appears to be a circular arrangement of tall, thin figures surrounding the camera position, though image quality prevents definitive conclusions. The most dedicated investigators continue their work. Small, privately funded search operations still comb the mountains on anniversary dates. Specialized drones with ground-penetrating radar have mapped subsurface anomalies throughout the region. Acoustic monitoring stations record and analyze forest sounds, searching for the voices multiple witnesses reported. Perhaps most haunting is how the case has embedded itself in modern folklore. Hikers in the Carpathians report encounters with the Watching Ones, tall, silent figures glimpsed between trees who vanish when approached. Others describe hearing youthful voices calling their names from empty forest. Some claim to have found small arrangements of stones or sticks in perfect geometric patterns while camping, only to find them gone by morning. In contemporary Romanian folk tradition, the missing scouts have transformed into protective entities who guide lost hikers to safety, the guardians of a forest that both takes and saves lives, according to rules humans cannot comprehend. The recovered compass from the arrangement continues its inexplicable behavior. Now secured in a climate-controlled evidence locker, it reportedly changes its heading on the anniversary of the disappearance each year, always pointing to a different location within the Carpathian Range. Unofficial expeditions have followed these headings, finding nothing but an unsettling sense of being observed, as one investigator noted in his final report before retiring from the case. Perhaps the most disturbing aspect is not what we found, but what we didn't find. No conclusion can be drawn that accommodates all the evidence or lack thereof. We are left with a mystery that seems deliberately constructed to remain unsolved. The case of the 5 scouts and their leader who vanished in the Carpathian Mountains confronts us with the limitations of certainty in an uncertain world. It stands as a modern parable about how easily the thin veneer of safety and understanding can be stripped away, how 6 lives can utterly vanish, leaving behind only carefully arranged possessions as mute testimony to their existence. Perhaps we are drawn to such mysteries precisely because they challenge our comfortable assumptions. We build our lives on the belief that reality follows predictable patterns, that people don't simply disappear without explanation, that wilderness can be conquered with sufficient preparation, that every effect must have a rational cause. Yet throughout human history, wilderness has represented the boundary between known and unknown, the place where our illusion of control dissolves. The deep forests and mountain shadows have always been repositories for our collective fears and wonder, housing both demons and transcendence in our stories. What happened to Eli Grayson and his 5 scouts? Were they victims of some cruel human design, elaborate hoax, or tragic cascade of natural circumstances? Did they stumble upon one of those rare phenomena that science has yet to categorize and explain? Or did they, as some local traditions suggest, cross a threshold between worlds, answering a call humans have heard in wilderness since our earliest days? Their story persists not just because it lacks resolution, but because it touches something primal in our relationship with the natural world. The recognition that despite our technological advances and scientific understanding, nature retains secrets we may never fully comprehend. For the families of Maya, Liam, Sophie, Noah, Ava, and Eli, these philosophical questions offer little comfort. Their lives remain permanently altered by absence, by questions without answers, and grief without conclusion. Perhaps the most respectful response to their loss is not speculation about supernatural forces or conspiracy theories, but simply acknowledgement that sometimes the world contains sorrows too deep for easy explanation. The arranged gear in that forest clearing stands as both evidence and metaphor. Objects once filled with human presence, now empty but precisely placed, as if to communicate something just beyond our understanding. Like the memorial stones in Valea Lupului, they mark not an ending, but an ongoing mystery, a story without conclusion. If you've made it this far, you're officially part of the Last Seen Stories family. Hit subscribe now for more unexplained disappearances and mysterious cases. And if you think you know what happened to the 5 scouts and their leader in the Carpathian Mountains, share your theory below. Perhaps in our collective wisdom, we might find possibilities that individual investigators overlooked. Or perhaps, like the villagers of Valea Lupului, we'll learn to live with mystery as an inescapable part of our human experience.